Ooh, yeah, yeah. They say it's all right. They say it's all right. Say it's all right. Have a good time. 'Cause it's all right. Whoa, it's all right. Now we gonna move it slow. Up in the lights are low.
Hello. I'm inside. You're inside. We're all inside. This is Chor Leoni Inside. My name is Erick Light, and I am hosting this brand new live stream music show dedicated to choral music, and we couldn't be more thrilled that you're with us. We were supposed to have concerts coming up this weekend, and it seemed like a long time since we've seen you, our public, and we're just glad that we can reach out in this way. You know, as the world kind of changed in about a 3-day span there, we got together as an organization and tried to figure out, what are we going to do? How are we going to figure out ways to be vital, to reach out, to allow a little bit of what we think is the power of this choral music to be with people at this time. And we came up with this idea of having a live stream. So we have a bit of a sense of occasion that this is a time that we can meet every Wednesday night and share in some really good music, but also get a chance to really hear some real performances. Chor Leoni has spent about the last 7 years really investing in high quality recordings, both audio and visual, of its repertoire and its concerts. And so we really wanted to go back into the vaults and use a lot of that material and find new ways to share that with you, as well as have guests with us that are sort of choral luminaries from throughout the world. And so this is the show. This is Chor Leoni Inside. It's happening right now in my attic. This is what we've got. But I am by no means the most important part of this show. Our producer and spiritual guidance man, and one of just my great friends and collaborators here, Phil Jack, is in his Burnaby studio, and he's running this whole show. Oh, Phil, there you are. Oh, hey.
Hello. We're on the internet,
Phil. I think. We are on the internet, and this is the closest I've been to anybody who's not my wife in a long time. So it's good to see you, such as it is. How are things?
Things are interesting. This is a pretty interesting, new, exciting, difficult experience. But I think we're
scary.
Oh boy, but exciting.
You are normally a very cool cucumber, and so I'm really happy that we could sort of push you out of your bounds. When we basically came up with this idea 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago. It's not been very long. And while you have been our videographer all of this time and have made so many of the wonderful videos that we've shown already to the public and will show through this show, you've never done anything like this as far as live streaming, have you?
No, this is definitely the first time I've done anything even remotely. No, this is the first time I've done anything even kind of like this at all. I've mostly watched a lot of streams, and those are mostly people playing Dungeons and Dragons on the internet.
Right. So now you can take like all of that pent up, I would do it this way and I would do it this way, and put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah, there's some great resources out there, and people who've been doing it for such a long time that there's just great inspiration out there to follow, and instructions, and YouTube, and all those things.
Absolutely. And I think we're going to be at the beginning of a golden age here of creating content from our homes. This may be an entirely new venture that may last well beyond our current situation. But I just got to say, just a big shout out to you at the front side here. It's just been so awesome working with you this closely in the last couple of weeks, and I can't wait to show everybody what we've made. So thank you, Phil. Thank you for joining us. Phil will be joining us later as well. He will be monitoring our streams and our feeds and comment sections on Facebook and YouTube. So we would like to have healthy comments there, questions, and Phil will chime in from time to time and relay that information back to the stream here, and we'll try to do our best to see that your questions and needs are met. We want to get into our first video, though. I feel like an old school MTV VJ. I'm like the Martha Quinn of choral music here, so we'll see how this goes. But our first piece is probably, I think, one of the most beautiful Canadian folk songs. It's Un Canadien Errant. And this is in an incredible arrangement by Donald Patrickin, who's published a lot of fantastic compositions and a lot of arrangements, especially featuring French Canadian music. And wonderful guy. He had this version in mixed choir format, and I fell in love with it. And I asked him right before we took the choir to Singapore and Bali 2 summers ago, hey, we're going to be competing in a folk song category. Would you consider working on this for men's voices? And he's like, well, I haven't written actually all that much for men's voices. Do you want to collaborate on this? So it's really the genius of this arrangement is all him. But I kind of helped work with him on the nuances of getting it to work for men's voices. And it's a beautiful piece. It was written in the text of it came out of the Lower Canadian Rebellion of 1837. And it basically tells the story from a soldier's perspective of a soldier who is exiled in that rebellion and can no longer return to his homeland of Canada. And the song has, because of its beauty of its melody, which was an original Quebecois melody put to these lyrics, because of I think the beauty of this and this idea of being exiled from your homeland and love for your homeland, this has been a folk song that's been sung by many people. Leonard Cohen's covered it, among others. So we're really excited that we can share this performance from you. This was from a performance at St. Andrew's Wesley Church in downtown Vancouver just a few years ago. This is Un Canadien Errant. You can't help but hear that a little differently these days. What a beautiful, beautiful tune. And man, I miss my guys. It's just lovely to see their faces up here, and that's part of what we're doing here as well. Chor Leoni, I'm sure, is flooded the comment sections already, hopefully saying nothing but good things. And but it's just it's a wonderful time, not only for us to reach out to you, our audience, but to be together as a choir in this way and reflect on some of the great work that we've done. I miss their faces. And here's another face that I miss. Is one of my best friends in the whole world, Dr. Ethan Sperry. I got to know him when he was the head of choral activities at Miami of Ohio. He ran the wonderful Miami of Ohio Glee Club, and we got to work together there when I was with Cantus. And he then moved to Portland, became director of choral activities at Portland State, where he's just tearing up the world. And actually, then I joined him there in Portland, where I lived for 8 years. And he's the main reason why I did this. And I thought for our very first time that we had a guest on this show, I thought, well, what the heck? I'm just going to have somebody who's awesome and is my friend. And if I screw up at interviewing him, he will forgive me. Let us please welcome Dr. Ethan Sperry. Hello, Ethan. How are you?
Hey, Eric. I am doing really well. It is so good to see you. So we miss you in Portland.
I miss Portland too. And just before we got on, you were telling me of all the very Portland things people are doing during the COVID things of CBD shots and coffee and other things that we may not go into but it's I'm glad to see that Portland.
We are keeping Portland weird even through the coronavirus.
I don't think any virus could probably knock it out of existence. So I got to ask you, first of all, I'm sitting here listening to my choir and missing them terribly and hearing their beautiful sounds and missing their beautiful faces. What have you done in the last, weeks here as pivoting, trying to be a musician, a leader of choral people, of singers? What's this been like for you?
It's really crushing. There's the two levels of it. I mean, all of us, we have so many public events planned that we all look forward to, whether it's the students or I also have an adult community chorus, the Oregon Repertory Singers, very much like Chor Leoni. And these are a huge part of our lives. The concerts, the tours we had planned this summer. My chamber choir from Portland State was supposed to sing at the World Symposium on Choral Music in New Zealand. All of these things are canceled. It's just these huge parts of our lives. And that was sort of the first wave of shock, but it's nothing compared to just not making music on a daily basis. Just not having that in your life. It's the worst part of the quarantine. I know people are very into making these virtual choirs, which are really cool to watch, and they're fun experiences, but they're virtual and they're no more real than it's not the same thing to be friends with somebody on Facebook as it is to actually have a friendship with somebody. And it's that real contact, both with each other as musicians, with the music itself. There's a huge gaping hole, I think, for a lot of us. And thanks for creating a format where we can sort of reflect on it, but also just go back into some of our archives. I think it's a great place to be. These aren't virtual videos. That was a real concert performance you just saw with real people. And I think that's a great place to be right now. There have been so many wonderful choral recordings made. And I hope the show runs for a while because I think there's a lot of great exploration to be done. And thanks for having me here to kick it off.
Well, it's just nobody better, frankly. You've had a varied career and you've experienced choral music from so many different angles. I think you and I share a common, maybe not skepticism is the right word for the virtual choirs, but I think we understand what this means to have a choir and what this music making is. I want to get into that probably a little bit later on in the show,
sure.
But I want to ask you, sometimes people have been equating the virtual choir with making a recording, which you and I have now done, four albums. I can't even count. It's been
five albums. Yeah,
quite a few times in me in various capacities of producing and whatever. And I know this is a process that you believe very, very strongly in. I'd like you to talk about like why you've decided to make this great commitment to making high quality choral recordings, and then maybe talk a little bit about this new one that has just come out.
Sure. The recording process is something I so value because of what the way it pushes singers' musical skills. I really love championing the music that way too, making sure we've got a really great recording in a great acoustic.
No coughing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's actually one of the biggest things. I can't tell you how many of the greatest live performances I have really, loud audience noises, phones going off, babies crying, coughing. That there's, first of all, the ability to remove some of that, the chance to give students multiple times to get their best singing, but also just to take the same piece that we've worked forever on, and then we can spend 2, 3, 4 more hours in a row just really zooming in and drilling down to a level of detail that you can't get to in concert. It's a very different kind of process, but you grow so much as a musician by being pushed down that road, especially if you have the right producer guiding the sessions. And then what I've loved about our process, we haven't been doing a lot of fakey kinds of things. We are recording as an ensemble. The whole ensemble is singing as a choir. But after you hear sort of your best takes cherry-picked together, it allows you to sort of lift the level of the choir the next year. They can sort of hear that next step. And it's such a valuable thing. Once you hear it, it's so much easier to replicate it. It's sort of like once you've been somewhere, you can get back there so much more easily, especially if you can relive that moment again and again. And then there's the other aspect. We've been trying to focus on music that doesn't have a lot of great recordings out there. And I think it's just so much nicer for someone who cares about choral music to have something that was recorded in high definition with no audience noise and with high quality microphones in a beautiful acoustic instead of, something that was recorded by somebody's mom's iPhone in the audience. It's just a better way to hear the music.
I think it's really interesting to me as the internet has sort of taken off. And bandwidth is getting better. We're broadcasting all of this in high definition, so we're trying to give as close to a real thing as we can. But choral music, like the things that have become so popular in our field, are these cell phone videos on a subway station, and and people are seeing music made in other places. And I think some of that's to do with we now all have these amazing recording devices in our pockets with us at all times. But I think it's so interesting that now we live in a world where it's cheaper and easier than ever to make a high quality recording and to make a thing that can be so dear to you as a piece of art. The recording becomes something else other than that performance. It becomes this like kind of object that exists forever. But it's just so interesting to me that we've sort of gone the other direction.
I disagree. I don't think this is an either or decision. I think we have both the joy of celebrating all this sort of encounters of music in our daily life that pop up on YouTube or TikTok, and that's one thing. And then you have the other thing that you listen to on your headphones with your eyes closed. These are two different experiences, and people don't definitely want to have them both. I don't think this is an either or.
I just think it's just really interesting to me that, and sometimes I think the popularity of these things and for how easy it is to point your phone at something and get it versus the Mount Everest climbing that we do when we're trying to make these albums. But I tend to feel that it's super worthwhile. I love that you say it's such an educational experience. I know that we as Chor Leoni have felt that, and I think both you and I realize, like, when you do this process, right, nothing lifts the choir, as you were just saying, any higher than making one of these kinds of albums. So this album is the second one that we've done together, featuring the music of a friend of ours, Ēriks Ešenvalds. Can you tell me just a little bit about how you've come to his music and why record a second album of his stuff?
Right, that's a really, really good question. He's my favorite living composer. He is certainly a follower of Morten Lauritsen and Erick Whitaker in terms of expanded tonality and writing music that is just ravishingly beautiful. But unlike some of the other people that are in that vein, he also writes much longer, much edgier pieces, and he has a wider range. And he has a number of pieces that are 12 minutes long, 15 minutes long. And those are pieces that are having a harder time getting out there because so many fewer choirs can sing them. And so I really wanted on this album to explore some of those longer pieces and some of the sounds that he had available. We did that with 2 on our previous album. We did The First Tears and his oratorio Passion and Resurrection. But those are the pieces that I feel like aren't getting represented. And then I also wanted to make sure we had a few of the shorter, more standard, what he's really known for. And then there's just this lovely thing that I introduced him to Paul Ann Peterson, who's the former poet laureate of Oregon. And he started setting her poetry. So we have 2 of those settings of sort of this Latvian composer from almost halfway around the world, working with a poet from my home state. And how beautifully that fuses together in these kinds of collisions of cultures or artistic influences. So I also wanted to make sure to get her pieces recorded.
Yeah, and they're wonderful additions to, I think, the repertoire and to this album. I think they're fabulous. Well, we're going to first focus on one of those shorter pieces. O Salutaris Hostia. Can you just tell us briefly a little bit, give us a little intro on this piece?
Right. So this is just a short prayer asking for peace in our homeland, which seems quite timely at this moment. And the way the piece is structured, one of the things that Erick is so beautiful at is this, Ēriks is so beautiful at is this musical technique called elision, where one phrase begins before the previous one ends. And this piece is basically one long elision. It's an 8-measure chord progression that constantly repeats. And every time you think it's going to resolve and the tension is going to be released, it isn't. That search for peace, that search for that homeland is seemingly never ending. And every time you think you have that moment, I think it represents the struggle we're going to be in for quite a while right now. And let's hope that our current struggle ends as beautifully as this piece ends. Because, spoiler alert, this piece has a really happy ending.
It's a nice ending. And so it's why I really wanted to choose this piece. And you didn't have a video because this is from the album. So Phil Jack has collaborated with local artist Tiko Kerr. We've taken 3 of Tiko's paintings and set them into the visuals for this piece. So this is the visuals, the paintings of Tiko Kerr, the music of Ēriks Ešenvalds, and the conducting of Ethan Sperry. I can't tell you how much pleasure it gives me to have a friend like Tiko's art with a friend like Ēriks's music and a friend like Ethan's conducting. It's just it's just a joy. This is so fun to bring this together. Bravo to you, sir.
Thank you. And Phil, that's really beautiful. And I look forward to meeting Tiko. Wow, what a that just I hadn't seen that before. That's extraordinary.
Yes, we're gonna do. It's gonna be like the Barbara Walters special. We're gonna try to make the conductors cry over their own. Yeah.
Sounds good.
We'll see, but it's it's just lovely to do that. That piece is like almost practically perfect. I mean, it's just it's like Mozart Ave Verum Corpus level of music making. It's simplicity. Yeah. It's and trusting what's happening in the piece. And wow, those sopranos! How about that?
Yeah, that's Kate Ludington and Maeve Steer as the two soprano duet soloists.
What a joy to work with them! I tell you, it doesn't get much better than that. We were talking about this before about the virtual choir, and I don't want to necessarily ask about virtual choirs, but some of our recent social media posts led me to think I haven't necessarily maybe asked you this question. If a virtual choir maybe has some problems with it or isn't maybe necessarily a choir, what is a choir to you? What is its defining elements? I think you and I both agree it's more than just voices coming together to be heard by a listener in parts or something like that. I think it's much more than that to both of us. And I'm really curious to hear, what do you think is that fifth element of choral music making?
Well, a choir is a community, and there are different ways to form choirs. I've had a chance to conduct choirs like all-state honor choirs where the community has been formed rapidly, from different schools from around the state. But even then, it's people living and breathing in the same space, experiencing music together through a process that they grow with the music as a community. And sometimes in the case of like your Chor Leoni or my organ repertory singers, student choirs, the students tend to keep graduating. But in the adult choirs, these are people that have been making music together for a very long time. The same is true of a lot of our professional orchestras. And that's the element that comes across so clearly in the performance, is that it's not just that all these people love music, it's that they've lived with the music together. And even though I loved all of Eric Whitaker's virtual choirs, like those people never met each other or had that experience with the music together. And even though it's a very cool virtual experience and an amazing thing for music production, I just kind of wish he'd chosen a word other than choir. Like it's a virtual something else. But I guess it's the same thing. A virtual friend is not the same thing as your real friend.
Maybe our lexicon will develop so we get those words.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But
yeah.
I think it's that lived experience, that shared experience, both in the rehearsal room and also the time that people spend together outside of that comes through. Everybody sees how the community interacts on stage, for good or for bad. But in my experience, people that take the time to sing together, these are just the best people that there are, especially when they're not the professionals, that they're just doing it sheerly out of love and out of a desire to create beauty. That's about the best thing that humanity has to offer. And one of the things that I find fascinating is that throughout music, throughout history, we know that every group of people in every culture, in every time period, have chosen to sing together. This seems to be something that really is a basic human need. It's not always like as a concert form. In fact, it's more often as a communal thing. What's weird about our music is the audience, the people who actually want to sit and listen and not participate. But just this desire to do this together with our voices, it seems to be one of the most basic human things that's available. And each community is different. And so different wonderful communities singing the same piece, you're still going to see something different in what that shared experience is coming to life.
I could not have said that better. And I think you and I have we always are striving to make sure that what you're just talking about is palpable in the music making. It's not just about the intonation, the blend, all of those things that of course we work on and of course matter. But my, oh my, people, no one's ever going to get those things perfect, right? We make recordings and edits and there's still like little things you're like, ooh. But when that love can come through, when that shared vision can come through into the music and through the voice, it's quite extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah. That's why I've decided to spend my life doing this. I can't. It's an amazing thing to do. Yeah,
we're very lucky that way. I want to get on to playing the last track of the new album, which is called Translations, and it just came out on Naxos. What was it? March 13th, was that the date, or
yes? Yep,
one of those really bad dates that will go down in history when the world shut down. So But this last piece, I think, is quite extraordinary, and I think it deserves a little bit of maybe setup as far as how Ēriks has written the piece, how he's scored it, and maybe a little bit in your mind, maybe the narrative it's even telling.
Yeah, so this is a setting of In Paradisum, the Latin text that some composers use as the end of a requiem mass, although it's technically not a piece that would be sung at the church. It's a piece that would be sung as part of the burial ceremony. And it's a short Latin text, and it's a movement, if you've heard Fauré or Duruflé's requiems, that tends to have a very short setting of it. And Ēriks makes it 13 minutes long. It's quite a musical journey. And I think it can easily be read in the straight up liturgical sense of starting in this world with a vision of what paradise might be like, and then some fear as we're getting to the point of crossing over, and then maybe the arrival where paradise might be. I've had many people listen to this, myself included, and say, God, I hope paradise sounds this beautiful if it exists when I get there. I think it's gutsy for a composer to try and represent that in music, to try and say, I can picture that and put it in sound. This is a very unusual orchestration. It's for 8-part choir and then viola and cello solos. And it is really prominently featuring especially the cello. That is the primary voice in the piece. And it's almost like a cello concerto with the choir playing the role of the orchestra. That the choir is really backing up the cello for most of the piece, and most of the piece doesn't even have any words. And you'll hear it distinctly when the choir takes over and starts singing words. The choir moves into the foreground, but most of the rest of the time we're singing hums and ahs and just other tone syllables. The viola is requested in the score to be off in the distance, and Ēriks wrote this piece for his grandmother, who really sadly died the morning of the premiere performance. So she never actually got to hear it, literally by just a few hours. But you can almost envision this piece as the cello being him, trying to represent himself in the foreground. And he can hear what's happening with his grandmother, the distant viola, as sort of this echo or this distant voice that's been calling to him. So, I mean, those are some of my thoughts. I'm sure there are many, many other ways to read this piece, but it's a longer journey and mostly without words. And for those of us in the choral world, where we're used to the text telling the story, this gets much closer to a choral piece being instrumental music, where the pitches, harmonies, and rhythms tell the story instead of the text.
Yeah, it's not really a setting of the In Paradisum. That's sort of the background story of the piece, isn't it? I think the musical writing is it's
Yeah.
almost tone poem-esque, I think.
Yeah.
So it's
We were really lucky to get the assistant principals of the Oregon Symphony to join us. So Marilyn de Oliveira on cello and Charles Noble on viola. Yeah.
And I think it's just one of the it's certainly one of the most original settings of this text I've heard in recent times, and I was glad that we were able to record it just so beautifully. Phil has created a video around this as well, and so you will now hear In Paradisum by Ēriks Ešenvalds. So much grief and peace in equal measures in that, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
thank you, Phil. That was gorgeous. Huh.
Well, speak of the devil, let's bring that guy back here. Phil, get back here. Where are you?
Oh, hello.
Oh, there you are. That's just the three of us. It's great. Phil, anything from the comments section, the peanut gallery there for us? Yeah, I know. I keep wanting to like pat him, and where is the other side? Pat him or lick his head or something. I will not do any of that, but he really is adorable.
None of those things would be appropriate in the current environment, Eric. Sheesh.
Agreed. Yes. Any comments or anything out there?
Well, it's pretty exciting for our first show. We were getting pretty close to 400 viewers on YouTube, which is really exciting, I think. A lot of people that we recognize, familiar faces, fans, but also, of course, lots of our own members. I have one message here from Rick Bennett, and he just wants to say that he and his wife are listening from Hornby Island, where the most gorgeous sunset is happening while we listen to this piece. We are speechless with wonder. Bless Ēriks, Ethan, and PSCC. I had another one here from Rod Locke, who says his daughter thought that he was going on to Zoom to rehearse with the choir, and she thinks that we're just lazy for just sitting and doing this show.
She's not wrong. She's not wrong. But such is life right now. Well, thank you, Phil. And before we move on into anything else here, I want to just do a little bit of housekeeping. We will be archiving this show on Chor Leoni's website. You can go there, and for the next week, you'll be able to watch this. You can share that link with people. They'll be able to watch it in high definition there. It'll be great, and we hope that you do that. We also hope that you subscribe to this show via YouTube, and then you can just get the notifications of when we're back on live again. We also are looking at a rebroadcast probably on Sunday at some time. We have not determined that time, but we will let you know. Another great way to stay in touch with us is to subscribe to our eRoar newsletter, and we can get you all the information about this as well as any other upcoming things with Chor Leoni. Speaking of which, one of the joys of for this putting the show together has been getting guests. And Ethan, let's see if you know the names of any of these people I'm about to name drop. So next week we're going to have Michael McGlynn on. Have you heard of him?
Absolutely, yeah. He's the conductor of Anuna and several other groups, and an amazing arranger of Celtic and Gaelic folk music. I've done tons of his music.
This is great. You're like, I don't even have to sell this. I just get to say a name, and then you're like, So
I'll be tuning in.
We'll also have Chanticleer has agreed to be on the program. Have you heard of them?
No, never heard of them.
Never heard of them. Yeah, they'll someday they'll make it. Then we've also got Donald Nally, who is running, I think, one of the finest professional choirs in North America, The Crossing, out of Philadelphia, and it's just doing extraordinary work. And I'm really excited to talk with him and play some of the ridiculously awesome music that they're doing. Carrie Tennant from Vancouver Youth Choir is going to be with us. Patrick Gardner from Rutgers University. All these folks need to get scheduled, and that's something I need to start doing tomorrow. But it's going to be really fun to have some friends like you, old friends like you, on this program, as well as some people I don't maybe know as well, but it's just going to be fun to share their perspectives and share their music in this way. So it's kind of a nice way to just, sit at home, listen to some pretty stuff and have some conversations. So, but please do get on the website and subscribe and do all of that good stuff. And I want to thank Phil again for everything that he's done for this show. It's just been extraordinary. Ethan, people know you as a choral conductor for sure, but my guess is people have encountered you far more as a choral arranger, and you've also been sort of extraordinarily into arranging and being a part of world and global music. How did you get into that? How does a guy grows up in New York City, gets involved in arranging, and especially working with Indian music?
So I started choral arranging really early on, just for my pop a cappella group in college. And arranging is something I've always loved to do. I made it a large part of my doctoral studies. I was fortunate enough to study with Morton Lauritsen, just wonderful teacher as well as a composer. And then I got this job at Miami of Ohio, and there was a guy named Srinivas Krishnan, who was an engineer who had moved from India to Ohio to get his master's at Miami University in engineering. And then he had been working for Procter & Gamble in Cincinnati. But in addition to being an engineer, he was a phenomenal tabla player and singer. And he really wanted people to be more involved in Indian music. And some people would say he was thinking outside the box, but he doesn't really have any Western musical training. I'm not sure that he was aware there was a box.
There was a box.
Like in America, when people study Indian music, they tend to learn the sitar or learn the tabla, learn one of the Indian instruments. But Srini didn't see that distinction. He's like, just learn the music. And he would come up and work with music majors at Miami and sing them the raga melody, and they would transcribe it, and then they would play it on their instruments, whatever they were, with him playing percussion. Yeah. So the first time I saw his group, that was called the Music of India Ensemble, it was 3 flutes and a cello and a trombone, all playing a raga while he accompanied on the tabla. And I was like, this is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Have you ever wanted singers? And he said, yes, absolutely, but no one's ever been interested. So I signed up my mixed choir, the Collegiate Chorale, for this project, and we went looking for sheet music of Indian music for choir, and we found the one piece that was published at that time. And after we did that one piece, we decided we needed more music. So he started doing the same thing with me, introducing me to Indian melodies, and then I would write them down and do choral versions. At first, it was sort of simple unison singing, call and response with him, kind of like you would see on an Indian stage. And then I got much more involved in the film music. I got some travel grants. I went to India. I started learning about the classical music, but also going to the movie theaters. And then through a real stroke of good luck, I got introduced to A.R. Rahman, who is the greatest of the Indian film composers and has won 2 Oscars and 2 Grammys, in addition to all sorts of awards for his music in India. And also, lesser known fact, he is the best-selling recording artist of all time. He has sold far more albums than Madonna, the Beatles, Britney Spears, and Michael Jackson all put together. I think in the West, we're a little uncomfortable with the idea of a brown person who happens to be Muslim being the best-selling recording artist of all time. So we don't go around trumpeting that, but he is. And when he first heard my choir in 2003 sing one of his pieces, he burst into tears because he saw how much my students were loving and enjoying his music. And it was his first time ever seeing any non-Asians sing his music. Right. And it was, in his words, the first time he understood that his music could cross cultural boundaries. And I know that that's something we have issues with these in modern society, but A.R. Rahman clearly wrote his music with that idea, that he wanted it to be global music. He hates being thought of as like the great Indian film composer. He's like, no one calls Mozart the great Viennese composer. They just call him a great composer. And he loved the idea of us working together on these arrangements because he loved the idea that a Muslim and a Jew could work to produce beauty together, and thought that was a really important message to send. So I've done some work on the older Indian classical music through meeting Srini, and then I've worked with A.R. Rahman on a lot of his music as well.
It's fantastic. It's been such a, I think it's your work and your connections there, and the way that your choral series has gone out there it's really changed how people program for their choirs in North America. People are incorporating that kind of music into their repertoire far more regularly, and I have to say, I think people are starting to incorporate this music into their repertoire with far more nuance, other than just being the concert closer for for their show, and starting to realize the breadth and depth of what is there. Chor Leoni is not alone in this. We have also done your arrangements and your arrangements of A.R. Rahman, and we want to play for you a video of us performing one of your arrangements. This is Wedding Qawwali. Can you say a little bit? Do you know? Give us a little bit of background on the song.
Sure. So A.R. Ramon's first crossover attempt to the West was a Broadway show that was produced by Andrew Lloyd Webber called Bombay Dreams, and it ran for a while in London and in New York. And so this piece is from that show, and it's from a wedding scene. And so it's based on sort of Pakistani and parts of Indian traditional wedding music, Qawwali singing, which would usually be done by two singers in alternation. And so I do a lot of that with the tenors and basses as sort of large groups. Traditionally, this would be improvised. So A.R. Rahman, sort of for the show, wrote down what would be a crazy, flashy improvisation, but of course it's done the same way every time, 8 days a week in the Broadway show. And so I asked the choirs to do some of these very complicated tongue twisters, which are really much easier for a soloist to do, like the way they did in the original. So it's taking a piece that's hard enough for soloists and making it even harder for choirs. And one of the things Rahman has said in a lot of interviews is he thinks this piece and others have caught on because Western choirs are striving for this kind of rhythmic complexity, that we're really anxious to tackle those kinds of challenges, like in Indian music. And actually, the complexity is a selling point, not a detriment. And so he's not shying away from that, and neither are I, and neither am I, and neither are so many choirs that are singing these pieces. I love it.
Let alone what it's doing pedagogically. It's just... I think this, and I think Wedding Qawwali of your arrangements, it's one of my favorites. I think it's just one of the most joyous pieces, and it has such strength in that joy. It is such strength in that joy, and it's just always been so much fun to work on. And Lord knows we do have to work on it, because those tongue twisters are you are not kidding around. They are challenging. This is a performance that Chor Leoni did 2 summers ago when we were singing in Singapore. We made it into the Grand Prix for the Singapore International Choral Festival, and we sang this along with a Veljo Tormis work. So we really wanted to show our range. And in preparation for this performance and this tour, we worked with local Indian dance instructors. So they came in and worked with us. And so all of the moves that you see have meaning to go with the text. And it was another just beautiful collaboration of cultures, and I have to say, you won't see them in this video, but it was probably my favorite standing ovation, similar to what you're talking about, Ethan. In the middle of the Singapore International Festival, in the middle of this hall, there was this tiny little choir from India. And when we started singing this, they didn't know what we were about to sing. Their faces just lit up. I was playing shakers in the back so I could watch them. And the standing ovation that we got from them, a bunch of Canadians singing their music, was just overwhelming. And you realize that you worked that hard to honor them and honor their music, and to have that favor returned back was extraordinary. It was just extraordinary. So, Ethan, I want to thank you so much for being with us, our first guest here. I want to thank you for everything you do for this art farm, for what you do for choral music, for what you do for me. Just thank you so much. Please buy his album, and the information's down below. You can stream it, all the rest of that, and Godspeed, Ethan. I just hope you nothing but great things. To honor you, and to as our final video for this episode, we'll now perform Wedding Qawwali.
Right.
Mubarak.
want to thank you so much for joining me this evening. The world's been a little uncertain, and I hope this is a chance for us to bring you a little bit of peace, a little bit of connection, and I hope that we can see you every week here at this time on Wednesdays. This can be a little bit of your tradition in days that don't seem much different from one another. Please do what you can to honor those that are out there working hard in putting themselves in harm's way, so that we can be safe, and we can be trying to live life as best we can at this time. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thank you very much.
Ooh, yeah, yeah. They say it's all right. They say it's all right. Say it's all right. Have a good time, 'cause it's all right. Whoa, it's all right. Now we gonna move it slow. Up in the line.